All right, it looks like we're back for another round of scary stories to tell in the dark. Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. Right, Rico?
I really don't want to be here right now, guys. Whoa. Oh, hey, Rico, it's okay. I'm going to be right here with you the whole time, man. Oh, Trev, that's so cool of you. See, this is why you're my best friend.
And Monica is also joining us this time too. Hey, Monica.
I just like scary stories.
So do I. Well, I think we should begin, shouldn't you? Yeah, let's listen to our first story, guys.
Ugh. I don't want to do this.
Good afternoon, children. Today we will continue to read some stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. We will be reading these stories with permission of HarperCollins Publishing. The Haunted House. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. Then there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally, everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step, step, step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door opened. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The haunt sort of swayed, like she didn't know what to do, then just faded out. The old preacher waited and waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly. Step, 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 closer and closer. Step, step, step. And it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time, the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said,
"In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you, and what do you want?"
The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman, about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in her eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for her money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and to lay it in the collection plate at the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. And she said,
"If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church."
The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at that bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to that house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. You know, that one was like really good. Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all.
I still hated it. This is ridiculous, man. A ghost and cellars and flesh, and she didn't have a nose, and it was just, hey, listen, Rico, that one wasn't really all that scary. It was really just more like Monica, help me out. It was a slow burn. It was a slow burn, Rico. It's all right. Yeah, you know what? You're right. Let's go on to the next story.
That's the spirit, Rico. High beams. The girl driving the old blue sedan was a senior at the high school. She lived on a farm about 8 miles away and used the car to drive back and forth. She had driven into town that night to see a basketball game. Now she was on her way home. As she pulled away from the school, she noticed a red pickup truck follow her out of the parking lot. A few minutes later, the truck was still behind her. I guess we're going in the same direction, she thought. She began to watch the truck in her mirror. When she changed her speed, the driver of the truck changed his speed. When she passed a car, so did he. Then he turned on his high beams, flooding her car with light, He left them on for almost a minute. He probably wants to pass me, she thought. But she was becoming uneasy. Usually, she drove home over a back road. Not too many people went that way. But when she turned onto that road, so did the truck. I've got to get away from him, she thought, and she began to drive faster. Then he turned his high beams on again. After a minute, he turned them off. Then he turned them on again and off again. She drove even faster, but the truck driver stayed right behind her. Then he turned his high beams on again. Once more, her car was ablaze with light. What is he doing? She wondered. What does he want? Then he turned them off again. But a minute later, he had them on again, and he left them on. At last, she pulled into her driveway, and the truck pulled in right behind her. She jumped from the car and ran to the house. Call the police, she screamed at her father. Out in the driveway, she could see the driver of the truck. He had a gun in his hand. When the police arrived, they started to arrest him. But he pointed to the girl's car. You don't want me, he said. You want him. Crouched behind the driver's seat, there was a man with a knife. As the driver of the truck explained it, the man slipped into the girl's car just before she left the school. He saw it happen, but there was no way he could stop it. He thought about getting the police, but he was afraid to leave her, so he followed her car. Each time the man in the back seat reached up to overpower her, the driver of the truck turned on his high beams. Then the man dropped down, afraid that someone might see him. Okay, I actually really don't like this one. Really, Monica? Yeah, like someone being in my car without me knowing it and they're trying to like maybe do me a murder. Do you a murder? Yeah, like do me a murder and like I don't know about it. Yeah, that actually kind of frightens me. Yeah, that is like really scary. 'Cause like you don't know. Exactly, you don't know. Oh, we learn something new about our friends every day. I don't like the way you said that, Moss. No, I didn't say it isn't. No. What are you trying to imply? I'm not implying anything. I'm just... You know what? I think we should move on to the next story.
Yeah, totally. Like, guys, we should totally move on to the next story.
What do you come for? There was an old woman who lived all by herself, and she was very lonely. Sitting in the kitchen one night, she said, "Oh, I wish I had some company." No sooner had she spoken than down the chimney tumbled 2 feet, from which the flesh had rotted. The old woman's eyes bulged with terror. The 2 legs dropped to the hearth and attached themselves to the feet. Then a body tumbled down, then 2 arms, and a man's head. As the old woman watched, the parts came together into a great gangling man. The man danced around and around the room. Faster and faster he went. Then he stopped, and he looked into her eyes. "What do you come for?" she asked in a small voice that shivered and shook. "What do I come for?" he said. "I come for you." Okay,
I did not like that. I did not like that at all. Yeah, you can't just jump scare on someone like that, guys. Whoa. Yeah, that was ridiculous, man. I'm getting out of here. Yeah, I'm getting out of here too.
You guys are such babies.
You're a baby.
Whoa, Rico, calm down.
No, I'm not coming down. I'm tired of getting scared. I'm tired of all these jump scares. I'm tired of all this spooky stuff.
Rico, are you going to storm out again like you did last week?
No. Yes. And I'm taking Trevor with me.
Trevor, you going to go with Rico?
Yeah, I'm going with Rico. Let's get out of here.